Welcome to the NFP podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back.
Hi there.
We are, I guess we should say Merry Christmas because this is on Christmas Day. That's exciting. So Emily and I are going to take the next 3 weeks to go through the encyclical Humanae Vitae, which was written, or I should say released on July 25th of 1968 by Pope Paul VI, Saint Pope Paul VI. And the document is to address, at the time, the question that the faithful had and the clergy had of how do we respond to the spacing of children, family planning, and methods like artificial methods like birth control. And so the book that I've been reading is called The Contraception Deception, Catholic Teaching on Birth Control. It's by Patrick Coffin. And in reading that, he goes into Humanae Vitae a little bit. And an interesting part, Emily, about it is he talks about I don't think he talks directly about, like, he doesn't have insight into Pope Paul VI, heart, but he does bring up like kind of the tension surrounding him and what he was going through at the time and in writing this and discerning and praying and what are we going to do? How are we going to respond?
There was so much pressure to...
I did not realize this. I kind of thought, oh, he just wrote the encyclical, put it out there. And then I think if this is right, Patrick Coffin said that, he never wrote another encyclical after this. He had 10 years left of his papacy and he didn't write another encyclical.
I didn't know that part of it. I did know about all of the stuff ahead of time. There was so much. Everyone, clergy, the laity, there were people that were speaking to their, parishes, clergy and pastors saying like the church is going to be okay with this, like because of the Birth Control Commission. And who that involved. There was a neurologist on there that was super pro contraception. There was clergy. I mean, it was just pretty much known among the clergy, and word was spreading that the church they were gonna follow suit with the other Protestant denominations.
Really? I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know any of this. I'm really enjoying the book. I highly recommend it if anyone hasn't read it and is interested. But, so anyway, that kind of spawned this thought and I brought it up to Emily and she's like, yeah, let's do it. So and on that note, if anyone has time and would like to start a Catholic podcast where you are just reading aloud all of the church encyclicals, Emily and I would greatly appreciate that because
it would be amazing.
I know it'd be so great. And then you can have on people that are smart to add commentary to it. So I can design it all for you, but if you just could do it for us, it'd be so nice. Because as everyone's busy, I suppose. And so that means I'm just making excuses, but
it's so nice to be able to listen, right? Yes, we know things are coming out, but how often do we get the chance to sit down and read something?
Right. And I'm sure there's something on the Vatican website. I need to like subscribe to an email list or something that like sends you notifications. Hey, a new encyclical's out,
Probably
like a new like magazine publication. But anyway, so we thought Humanae Vitae is just so beautiful in our biased opinions. And so we just really want to have that out there. So at any point in time, people can find these episodes and at least listen to the beautiful words written by Pope Paul VI, who I think just very lovely and mercifully and boldly, confidently courageously addresses the issue and presents the truth of the gospel and of God and what he created us for. So that being said, we're going to dive in. Emily, do you want to just talk briefly, say something about who this encyclical is addressed to and why that is, I guess, kind of unique among encyclicals?
Absolutely. So historically, encyclicals are written and addressed to bishops. And this is the first encyclical that was written to all men of goodwill. So this states that this is a moral teaching and not just a Catholic teaching. So that's really specific to this encyclical, because that's not generally how they're presented. So this was written to the world, not just Catholics.
Which I get. I just love like the boldness. It's so great.
Right.
And we'll link, this is free. You can read it on the Vatican website. So I'll link to Patrick Coffin's book. I'll link to the Humanae Vitae document that Emily and I will be reading from the Vatican site. It'll be in the show notes. So, all right, Emily, I'll start and then we can just kind of alternate. Okay. We're going to go through the first part of the encyclical. It's, the first section is titled Problem and Competency of the Magisterium. And the magisterium, for those who are listening and don't know what that is the aspect of the church that we call it like the teaching body of the church. All right, so here we go, guys. We'll get started. Encyclical letter Humanae Vitae of the Supreme Pontiff Paul VI to his venerable brothers, to patriarchs, archbishops, bishops, and other local ordinaries, in peace and communion with the Apostolic See, to the clergy and faithful of the whole Catholic world, and to all men of goodwill, on the regulation of birth. The transmission of human life is a most serious role in which married people collaborate freely and responsibly with God the Creator. It has always been a source of great joy to them, even though it sometimes entails many difficulties and hardships. The fulfillment of this duty has always posed problems to the conscience of married people, but the recent course of human society and the concomitant changes have provoked new questions. The Church cannot ignore these questions, for they concern matters intimately connected with the life and happiness of human beings.
Part 1. Problem and Competency of the Magisterium. The changes that have taken place are of considerable importance and varied in nature. In the first place, there is the rapid increase in population, which has made many fear that world population is going to grow faster than available resources, with the consequence that many families and developing countries would be faced with greater hardships. This can easily induce public authorities to be tempted to take even harsher measure to avert this danger. There is also the fact that not only working and housing conditions, but the greater demands made both in the economic and educational field pose a living situation in which it is frequently difficult these days to provide properly for a large family. Also noteworthy is a new understanding of the dignity of woman and her place in society, of the value of conjugal love in marriage and the relationship of conjugal acts to this love. But the most remarkable development of all is to be seen in man's stupendous progress in the domination and rational organization of the forces of nature, to the point that he is endeavoring to extend this control over every aspect of his own life, over his body, over his mind and emotions, over his social life, and even over the laws that regulate the transmission of life.
New questions. This new state of things gives rise to new questions. Granted the conditions of life today and taking into account the relevance of married love to the harmony and mutual fidelity of husband and wife, would it not be right to review the moral norms in force till now, especially when it is felt that these can be observed only with the gravest difficulty, sometimes only by heroic effort? Moreover, if one were to apply here the so-called principle of totality, could it not be accepted that the intention to have a less prolific but more rationally planned family might transform an action which renders natural processes infertile into illicit and provident control of birth? Could it not be admitted, in other words, that procreative finality applies to the totality of married life rather than to each single act? A further question is whether, because people are more conscious today of their responsibilities, the time has not come when the transmission of life should be regulated by their intelligence and will rather than through the specific rhythms of their own bodies.
Interpreting the moral law. This kind of question requires from the teaching authority of the Church a new and deeper reflection on the principle of the moral teaching on marriage, a teaching which is based on the natural law as illuminated and enriched by divine revelation. No member of the faithful could possibly deny that the Church is competent in her magisterium to interpret the natural moral law. It is, in fact, indisputable, as our predecessors have many times declared, that Jesus Christ, when he communicated his divine power to Peter and the other apostles and sent them to teach all nations his commandments, constituted them as the authentic guardians and interpreters of the whole moral law, not only, that is, of the law of the gospel, but also of the natural law. For the natural law, too, declares the will of God, and its faithful observance is necessary for men's eternal salvation. In carrying out this mandate, the Church has always issued appropriate documents on the nature of marriage, the correct use of conjugal rights, and the duties of spouses. These documents have been more copious in recent times.
Special studies. The consciousness of the same responsibility induced us to confirm and expand the commission set up by our predecessor, Pope John XXIII, of happy memory, in March of 1963. This commission included married couples, as well as many experts in the various fields pertinent to these questions. Its task was to examine views and opinions concerning married life, and especially on the correct regulation of births. And it was also to provide the teaching authority of the Church with such evidence as would enable it to give an aptly reply in this matter, which not only the faithful, but also the rest of the world were waiting for. When the evidence of the experts had been received, as well as the opinions and advice of a considerable number of our brethren in the episcopate, some of whom sent these views spontaneously, while others were requested by us to do so, we were in a position to weigh with more precision all the aspects of this complex subject. Hence, we are deeply grateful to all those concerned.
The Magisterium's reply. However, the conclusions arrived at by the Commission could not be considered by us as definitive and absolutely certain, dispensing us from the duty of examining personally this serious question. This was all the more necessary because within the Commission itself there was not complete agreement concerning the moral norms to be proposed, and especially because certain approaches and criteria for a solution to this question had emerged which were at variance with the moral doctrine on marriage, constantly taught by the magisterium of the Church. Consequently, now that we have sifted carefully the evidence sent to us and intently studied the whole matter, as well as prayed constantly to God, we, by virtue of the mandate entrusted to us by Christ, intend to give our reply to this series of grave questions.
It's so good.
It's a cliffhanger. It's like,
I know. It's true. You guys will have to wait till the next episode to hear the rest. But yeah, a lot of stuff jumps out at me. So anything you want to start with, Emily? Thoughts?
Yeah, just as we were talking about the Birth Control Commission and what they proposed and how they were in, big cahoots to accept contraception. It's at this point that he turns to a young Karol Wojtyła. And that's where a lot of the his writings from Theology of the Body, like that influenced a lot of this encyclical. And so it's just really beautiful how he, used St. John Paul II to help frame this whole, approach, if you will.
That is really beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't think I realized that.
Yeah.
He used that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when we were the first part, especially when he talks about just this whole first section, right? Looking at the problem. So he, in that number 2 section, I don't know if I read that or you read, I think you hadn't read that part, but just identifying in summary, right? I mean, it's so beautifully written, very intellectually worded, just lovely. I feel like summarizing, like, we see that people are asking for help. We
Yes.
see that there are married couples that are struggling, that they want to do God's will, and they see that this marital act is a big part of their marriage, right? It's a renewal of their marriage vows. Like, it's pleasurable, enjoyable. Like, it's something they can't eliminate from their marriage, right? So it's like food, right? We can't not eat. So how do we do that in like a temperate, healthy, good way, and pleading to say, like, give us answers. What do we do? Because the world is presenting a solution that looks really great.
Right.
Like, it prevents pregnancy and we can still have intercourse. Like, like, we can have some relief from this burden that we're feeling, and we don't want our families to feel burdened. So I just love that he really takes this approach of, very pastoral, right? Very fatherly. Like, I hear
Absolutely.
you. Right. Like, I hear you. I hear you. We're not ignoring the situation. And so, and then to lay out, here are the questions that were given to us. Here's how we proceeded to come up with the answer that we came up with. Here's what gives us the authority to make this statement, like why Christ, gave us this body to do his work and to preach and to teach in his name. So I just love the whole flow of it. I mean, it's a great setup for, okay, now what did you decide,
Exactly. And something to take into consideration to think about here is at the time, so 1968, there was no standardized charting for cycles for the menstrual cycle. There was no hormone testing at this time. There was no ultrasounds at this time. So generally speaking, there was inadequate training of providers for, an approach to this. And so this is where you have this young med student, not doctor yet, but Thomas Hilgers, who, gets his hands on this and really wants to change all of that after, reading this and pondering all of this. So there's so much going on at this time that looks really enticing because, why wouldn't something medically be helpful, to our bodies? And so another thing that is, I think, worth mentioning is the Birth Control Commission. That was 1963. So they, and that was put in place, like we said, by Pope John the 23rd.
And why was that put in place, Emily? Like, give a little bit more.
Same. So the birth control pill becomes available in the 60s, and the whole idea was, so the church's teaching was you can't frustrate the natural, the marital act. And so when you think about the previous uses of contraception, like condoms, for example, you can imagine and understand a little bit easier how that is a natural barrier, right? Like, it's a physical, tangible thing. But now you have this pill that's become available. And so it's kind of hard to explain that, really. And so
because it's not like a bear, it's not as, barrier like as like a condom, right?
Right. It doesn't go hand in hand with like the verbiage, if you will. Right. It's kind of like posing this other question. And so this is when Pope John the 23rd, he brings together a group of 25 clergy to head the Birth Control Commission. And then when he passes, Pope Paul VI increases this group to 50. So by the end of the group, 45 out of 50 of these clergy say that married couples should be able to contracept for the good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 45 out of 50.
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So then just another thing to put into context. So you have a Catholic divorce rate at the time of 10% and a Protestant divorce rate of 25%. Once
now has the Protestant church or churches, I know there's a lot of them, like, they pretty much come out at that time and say, yes, this is permissible.
They came out actually a lot earlier. So that this was like in the late 20s. They were, I'd have to go back to my notes actually, but they, I think it was Pope Pius X. Hold on just a second. Okay, so the Anglican Church in 1920, they met and reaffirmed the evil of contraception. So then in 1929, the Anglican Church reaffirms contraception is wrong, but it might be allowed for married people for certain circumstances. So at this time, the rest of the Protestants agree with the Anglican stance. So you've got this, I mean, there's a lot of time that goes by between then and the Humanae Vitae. So around 1929 to 1930, Pope Pius XI writes a document called, and I never pronounce this right, but it's called Costi Connubii, I think. And this is all about chaste marriage. So he condemns what the Anglican Church said, and he reasserts the Catholic teaching about why contraception is not allowed. And so then you have this baby boom that happens from like 1946 to 1964. And they really call it a Catholic boom because at this point, the Protestants are, it's okay to, you know, for example, at this time, it would be like using condoms, for example. And so, yeah, so you have this whole, you know, century going by, just things are unfolding. And then when the birth control pill hits the market in the 60s, it really puts a lot of pressure on the Catholic Church they're the only ones left standing saying like, okay, you know, we shouldn't be doing this, or saying they want so many people to say that we can use the birth control pill. And so when they presented that information about the commission, Pope Paul VI didn't do anything. Like they expected him to act immediately. And that's the time in the church where there were a lot of clergy telling people like, it's okay to use the pill. And then, and so that was 1966 that they gave him his report. And so from 66 to 68, he's working with John Paul II, and he's really prayerfully trying to discern like what to do. So there was so much that went into this. This was not just overnight. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was something I got from his Patrick Coffin's book, like kind of the history of it. Oh my gosh, I really just thought it was, you know, presented with these questions. Here's what church teaches. We're just putting it out there. Like I didn't realize there was a commission, that there was just so much thought, which then just makes me love this even more, you know, like the tenderness with which this was approached, you know, I love that. It makes me love Pope Paul VI even more. Like what a father, you know, what a father, and what a lover of my soul. You know, gosh, I could cry. Like that's one thing Joey and I talk about all the time, about how much we love Monsignor Marzik at St. Stephen's.
Yes.
Because we believe that he loves our soul more than he loves our love of him.
Yes.
And how much I appreciate that. Like I want you to care more for that than you do about my opinion of you or whether I like you. And anyway, it's just, yeah, that feels, knowing all that history, I feel like just makes this document then and this teaching really come to me with like, okay, my child, right? Like Mother Church, here's the truth. Like I love you, and here's the boundary, you know, like here's the fence. But it's like presented in that gentle motherly way,
right?
Of like, this is not changing, you know, like
right.
We're putting this down.
And then how much more does he care about the souls of the world by addressing it to everyone? You know,
yes,
that's so beautiful.
Yes.
Like he didn't.
It is so beautiful.
Yeah, he didn't just stop at the bishops or the Catholic laity. He said this is important for everyone to know. Yeah.
That's such a good point, Emily. Yeah, I mean that just speaks, I think, again, biased, the beauty of the Catholic faith and the beauty of the Catholic Church is that, you know, when rightly approached and rightly taught, like our mission is for the world. Like God is for all the world, right. All the world, right? Desires all people to come to the knowledge of truth and to be saved. And so for him, yes, to address it again, fatherly, right? Like I want all my children to know of the beauty of this and that we see you when we hear you. And so anyway, yeah, I think, without knowing that history, I feel like I didn't know that history at all when I read this, and I just loved it, you know, melted my heart, love this document. But now knowing the history, it's like a whole nother level. I feel like there's like a parent behind it, you know,
yes.
Wow, there was so much thought and care put into this.
So much love.
Um,
Yes.
the part that I was like, oh my gosh, we need to have someone on the podcast now to talk about the fear of overpopulation, because I feel like that's another just myth that's out there, that's so crazy. But even in the document, right, he doesn't say like, you crazy people believe the world's going to be overpopulated. He even addresses that in tenderness. Like,
he does.
I understand there's this fear that things are growing, the population's growing too fast and there won't be enough resources. And I don't know who I heard recently talk about this issue and how it, let's just be clear. My understanding of all the research right now is we have the opposite problem. We are not at replacement rate. Like,
right.
That there are economists, no faith, this has nothing to do with faith. There are just economists that are blowing the horn. Like, we are in serious problem right now, serious issue. So bad. Like, this is not good. Okay. So definitely way opposite end of overpopulation right now.
Right.
Globally. So, anyway, what was I saying about that? World population, overpopulation, other issue. Don't remember. Totally escapes me now. Oh, I remember. Okay. Is this reminder that like with people comes creativity. Like, people aren't just the consumers of resources. People create things too. So this notion that like, oh, well, we'll have more people in the world, therefore we'll have less resources. It is very much like a fear-based approach to life. Like, the more children I have, the less I will have. The less there will be, the more. And it's like, that's actually not how it works. I mean,
right.
in just natural law, but also like in God's economy, right? Like, the more I give, the more life I'm open to, the more life I receive. It doesn't make any sense. Like, God math just never makes sense.
Right.
The more children I have, well, the more love I have. Maybe I don't have like certain material things like in the way that I once thought I wanted, but my life is so much more full, and you hear that over and over and over again from people who continue to have children. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So
children are never a burden.
They're not. People are not a burden. And I love that. I feel like he just addresses that in this first section of like, by addressing all the truths gently, firmly, and beautifully written. So and then getting to the issue, like, so is there what is the question here at the time? Is the question, can we have marriage with, I feel like the question now has kind of evolved a little bit as like our culture's evolved just somewhat, to say like, at the time it was like, can married people do this because we want to space our children? It wasn't actually like, we just want to get married and never have kids.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It's almost like we need like a Humanae Vitae part 2 now to like address, just some of the other like thought processes and like cultural norms that have evolved as a result of this.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get into like the later part of the encyclical, and he kind of becomes like a prophet because he predicts so much that we're already seeing in our culture today. So maybe we don't need a part 2. He already covered it all, but
that's true.
Just something to like kind of bring it up, like, see, this is what was predicted and this is what's kind of come about as a result of that. So, yeah, any other, I'm kind of rambling, Emily, any other thoughts on like this section?
No, I think, I think just going through like we did, kind of setting the stage. So, I think it's helpful to know, like, just to imagine what was going on at that time and what had happened before. He completely shocked everybody because nobody expected what was coming.
I also love the thought of like him and Carol, Saint Pope John Paul II now, right? Like meeting together and talking. And I guess I just think I never got to, see Pope John Paul II in person, but I can just imagine those two, quietly meeting, and again, very fatherly,
right?
Given their two natures and their holiness, like just very fatherly, discerning, and saying like, okay, like, we know this can't change. Like, because, and this is again, I think, Emily, like something we've talked about before, always good to remember, like, because sex, the marital act, images who God is. And if we say that God is a generous, life-giving lover, like, then that act has to always and at all time reflect that, it always. And so I feel like that's, just, it feels even more confirmed. Like, this is not a man-made act. This is not for our purposes, that this act images, regardless of the outcome we want to come from it, like the nature of the act itself images God, and that is so sacred and holy. And so we have to guard that. We can't, it's kind of like we can't change it. It is very much, don't shoot the messenger. They're both like, how can we word this and like have people understand, because nothing is changing because God's not changing. I feel like that's just something that, the Catholics have a very unique understanding of sex and the desire. And then the climactic moment of sex,
right.
Like, that too is so special. That was what I loved about talking to Dr. Kloponis.
Yes.
Emily, my mind was like blown when he said the 3 components of good sexual education, and the third being pleasure. I have never heard anyone say that. I was like, yes, yes, we should totally be talking about that. Like, obviously, I've heard people talk about it in like, sex is good, it feels good, God made it, you shouldn't feel ashamed of it, blah, blah. But no, like actually talking about what does that moment image?
Right.
That little, momentary, amazing feeling that lasts like no time at all, right? It is imaging at like a minuscule slice of the ecstasy we will experience in the presence of God for all eternity.
Right. The beatific vision.
Like for young people to know that, though, like I feel like that's one thing where, when we say like, oh, let's teach people how to think, let's teach kids how to think. I'm much more of the mindset like, well, we need to teach them what to think too. Like, what is the truth? And the truth of that very intense moment, that feeling, is this. That is what you're going to feel when you experience God for all eternity. And I think that makes people very uncomfortable nowadays.
Oh, definitely.
Because we don't connect sex and God so closely.
No.
We don't.
No. Because if we do, then we have to think about our choices surrounding sex, and I think you're naturally convicted when, you might be using sex outside of marriage in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So yeah, nobody wants to connect those two.
Well, and I'm curious, like, I'm trying to remember, to be very honest, like I'm really trying to remember back before I learned all this, when I first learned about it, I guess, and then got married and started engaging in the marital act, like, was that uncomfortable inviting God into that space? And like, I don't think it was, thanks be to God, because we started our engagement, our marriage, very much aware that like, oh no, this is an act, like what the act was. So we were already there. But, God have mercy. Like before marriage, I was living a life that was not that great, right? For a long time. And at that time, like, yeah, if you had told me like you should pray, like I could do all these things with these people that I was dating, but I could not like pray with them. Like bringing God into that context, like that's just like weird. Like, no, like God's over there and like this is very separate, but it could not be further from the truth, which is, again, hence like the care with which this document was put together and the care with which this teaching came about.
Yeah.
It's very precious.
I agree.
It has to be handled.
It is very precious. Yeah.
And I love that he talks about responsibility, that there is this vocation comes with married life. You have to be responsible in your parenthood. And yeah, I think they recognize the responsibility that married people have in their vocation and their responsibility as, in this role of magisterium and in teaching that was entrusted to them and mandated to them by Christ. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that. So
he sets the scene really well.
He does. It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. So, okay. So that's, I guess, all we have for the first section. And then next week we will dive into the next part. Again, I'll link to a couple of those things. I also found, I don't know, Emily, if you have anything that we can link to about like the history, but I'll link to Patrick Coffin's book, like I mentioned earlier. But then there's also some information about this Papal Commission on Birth Control. So I'll link to that too if people are interested in reading more about the history part. So
obviously I know we've talked about this before, but The Theology of the Body for Beginners is such a great book just to bring all of this to life.
Yes.
And so anyway.
Yeah. All good sources. Yeah. I'll link to that book too. Then I'll put that one in there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. We will see you again next week, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.